Hey, it's Debbie, and I am talking to Karen Martel for a follow-up podcast on hormone solutions, as I know a lot of men and women struggle with unexplained weight gain, trouble sleeping, difficulty gaining muscle. Things change as we age. And I always say, don't blame the aging process, embrace it, and just do things differently. What once worked doesn't work anymore. So I have been working all day on creating a presentation on muscle protein synthesis, how to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, MPS, to get stronger, and how we need to change our approach to meal timing and what we're eating, protein forward meals to hit the MPS. Now, exercise we'll talk about as well, but today I want to talk about hormones with Karen as she's an expert, common problems with low estrogen, common problems with low progesterone, and then low testosterone. And then other additional complications for men and women, difficulty burning fat, increased carb cravings. We have metabolic inflexibility. We often struggle with insulin resistance or blood sugar instability, increase in inflammation and increase in oxidative stress, reduction in mitochondria function and energy. And then we've got the gut health issue, disruption due to hormone influence on gut motility and the microbiome, which I talked a little bit with Cynthia Thurlow on a recent podcast. So let me know your questions, comments, and we can always do a follow up from here. And I can always do a solo podcast deep dive into what we have common questions on. So send in your comments, and I want to make sure men listen to this. This is not about women. We all need to learn what to do differently to improve how we eat. Okay, I've got my favorite hormone specialist here, Karen Martel, fellow Canadian. So it's good to talk hormones with the Canadian who understands the language we use sometimes, even though I've lived in the States since I was 13 years old.
Yeah, I forget that you're an original Canadian, Debbie.
Yes, original. I just got my passport. We're going to Europe. It's like, I gotta get a passport. And it's good to have a Canadian passport, by the way. I think I was,
Yeah,
get the luggage tag
especially
that
right
says come
now.
from Canada. Don't associate
Yeah,
me. So, anyways,
yeah.
I'm at my mom's. I was just saying, I'm going to go podcast with my friend Karen, who lives in BC, and you're in Kelowna, right?
No, in outside of Kamloops,
Oh, Kamloops.
so a
Maybe it was
couple
somewhere with
hours from
Okanagan.
Kelowna.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's far
yeah,
away. Kamloops. I
yeah,
always get them all mixed up. I know the Okanagan
yeah.
area.
Because where were you from again? I can't remember.
Well, West Vancouver is where we lived
Okay,
when I was growing up, and then we moved to Seattle. But it was always the summer vacations, the Okanagan. And then as a young adult doing Ironman Canada, which was in
right.
Penticton for years. And so we used to always go twice a year to train on the course, then race, and just love it over there. So relaxing.
Nice. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you as the expert in hormones. You talk about this stuff every day to people. And I know I sent you some questions, just common problems that are related to hormone imbalances and solutions, because I just feel the need to keep sending this message out that we don't need to just deal with this as our new normal. And we can take
Exactly.
ownership of how we age by just doing things a little bit differently.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
What do you feel is the top complaints of women and even men too as they age? That what are they struggling with when they come to you?
Oh my goodness, there's so many things. I mean, the most common, of course, are, night sweats, hot flashes, and then the depression, anxiety, sleep problems. Those are
Hmm.
definitely up there. Uh, Early stages, like the things that women need to really be watching out for, just that are signs that, okay, something's shifting. is
Mm,
typically in their late 30s, early 40s, we start to see heavy bleeding and changes in your cycle, changes in
mm,
your PMS. So, are you suddenly feeling like you PMS for 2 weeks instead of a few days before your period arrives? And many women will say this. Many women will go to their doctors because they start bleeding out and they say, "Oh, I'm like suddenly going through a tampon every 10 minutes when I have my period." And they never had cycles like that before. Some women will say at in that stage that they do gain weight, not typically a lot, but it'll be like a 5 pound weight gain kind of out of nowhere. And they're just like, I didn't change anything. What's going on here? And it's kind of an all over weight gain. Um, Little bit on the libido side, not as much as it happens like in your mid 40s, but we do hear some women that start to lose libido because they start to lose testosterone for some women when
mm.
they're in their early 40s. It's almost like a half and half. Like a lot of women will hold on to their testosterone well into menopause, no problem. But we're starting to see earlier and earlier that testosterone is starting to go down.
Mm,
And we only produce about just under half of our testosterone from our ovaries. The rest is made through conversions and through our adrenal system, which is why we can hold on to it. And I think that it's because our stress has gotten so much worse as women that we're now starting to see that this testosterone is going down earlier and
earlier.
more often in women now. And so that'll affect, yes, libido, but also how you can put muscle on. So you're in the fitness space today, and many of your listeners are as well. And you know your body pretty well, and you know what it takes to put muscle on at this point, and to run a good race and all of those good things. So if you start to notice a difference in that, don't just chalk it up to getting older, because it could be that you're losing that testosterone.
Mm,
And estrogen will too, but that's later on. So if you're having some early signs of this where you're like, I'm lifting heavy, I'm prioritizing my protein, and yet I'm getting slower on my runs, I'm not able to put muscle on like I used to, check your testosterone
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so before I go through my little list, what hormones should we get tested and how often to track and
Yes.
how to course correct?
So we always want to try and test as early as possible. So even if you're listening to this, you're in your 30s, test now. If things are normal and you feel great hormonally, now's the time to actually test so that you have a baseline of what feels good for you.
Mm,
And you
good
want to
point.
do that on day 21 of your cycle or day 20, somewhere in there. Like you got both 3 day window, 19, 20, or
Mm,
21 of a 28-day cycle, or 7 days prior to the start of your period. You want to test then
mm,
because every woman is different. And there's some women that are very testosterone driven. There's some women that are very estrogen driven or sensitive to that progesterone. And just a small decrease in these in their numbers on their labs can make each woman feel very different, right? So
yeah.
one woman may not notice it at all, but then the next person comes along and she suddenly starts to have all these symptoms, but her testosterone looks fine. But if she had done a test at 35 when she felt great and she could say, wow, my total testosterone back then was
Mm, mm,
35 and
mm.
now it's 15. Maybe that could be why, right? So it could still be in
Mhm.
range, but for you, it's not
Not
enough, right? Because some
optimal.
of us just depend on those hormones more than others, right? So if you're
Hmm.
more estrogenic, a small decrease in estrogen could make you feel really crappy and start giving you symptoms. Or in other women, they can have zero estrogen and they don't even notice. They don't have those outward symptoms like the hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, things like that. So it is nice to have a baseline. If you're past those years, you still want to test. And it's interesting because there's some practitioners that say, like, oh, don't bother testing. If you're in menopause, no need to test. Or if you're in perimenopause because it changes so much, and we
Mm-hmm.
can't really get a good idea of what your hormones are doing, don't bother testing.
Mm-hmm.
I completely disagree with that because there's so many other markers that you could be looking at besides the hormones that can
Mm-hmm.
tell us that things are starting to go south, right? So things like cholesterol can go up, blood sugar can go up. And this can be because of the loss of estrogen and just a little bit of a loss of estrogen. And so if you're somebody that's super healthy, never had a cholesterol problem, never had a blood sugar problem, feeling great, you're super active, and then suddenly you don't feel as well. You look at your labs and your blood sugar is up, your cholesterol is up, and your estradiol is even down just a smidge. That could be your sign. Ooh, let's start catching this now and let's start
Mm-hmm.
supplementing with some estrogen therapy or some phytoestrogens, something that's going to help boost up that estrogen production or replace it. So I think that testing should happen for every single woman, especially before they start HRT, so that we can get a good idea of what's going on and then be able to track it. And
Mm-hmm.
also, we want to get you to certain numbers, right? So when you start HRT, you want to get the FSH below 25 if you can. You want to get testosterone, free testosterone to like 2 or 3, ideally. You want to get estradiol above 65 because that's where we get the bone protection. So a lot of women can start taking HRT, feel great, get rid of the symptoms like hot flashes, night sweats, and be like, okay, I think I'm on enough because those symptoms are gone. But then you look at their labs and their estrogen's like 20. And
Yeah.
that's enough to get rid of hot flashes, but it's not enough to protect your bones, your brain, or your
Mm.
heart.
Which are pretty important as we age. Brain and the heart. I
That's
mean,
pretty
the heart,
important.
if
Yeah.
we don't have a heart or if we don't have a brain, I mean, we're kind of dead either way.
Yeah.
So I think those are pretty
Yes.
much important to think
Yeah.
about what to
Major
do.
killers of women, right?
But I think the thing is, so many people just go to their doctor once a year and they might not be seeing a specialist and they're not taking ownership of their health now to be preventative and plan ahead for those years. And I think so much of the podcast coverage on hormones and social media now, people might get an idea, oh, I'm 40, I should start doing something and checking on my hormones and getting that baseline data. But do you feel that there's a lot of people that are not even testing at all, more like not even
Lots.
once a year?
Yeah, and doctors don't even a lot of them don't know how to test hormones, which is very interesting to me. Like they won't
Mm,
tell the woman, even if they're willing to do it, they won't tell them like, hey, if you're cycling, you need to take this on day 20 or 21 of your cycle. They won't even say that. So a woman could go on like day 2 of her period or day 28 when she has no hormone, like her progesterone and estrogen are super low. And then it'll look like she's in menopause almost, but they're
mhm,
supposed to be really low at that point.
mhm,
So, yeah, doctors really fail in that area when it comes to the hormones in women. They don't understand, they don't do proper testing. They refuse testing. It's ridiculous. So it is you should take matters into your own hands at this point. If you can't get your doctor to do it, always try first, but if you can't get them to do it, don't stop there. You guys in the United States have access to ordering your own labs. We have actually, we just started a whole website, like a whole shop of just test kits so that people can go in and just order their own tests as much as they
mhm,
want. So we've got like a thyroid panel, we've got, the full hormone panel with all of the CBC differentials, lipid panel, everything's on it. And the full panel is 275. So it's not
mhm.
too bad considering like what some private testing can cost
Yeah,
you.
because you can't go get your own labs in Canada.
No, not yet. It's terrible.
It's bad.
And then you can't like you won't you're very hard pressed to get proper like thyroid. You can't get a thyroid panel. You can't like, it's pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you say that. Now, I know when people even go see I'm not bashing doctors, but when we use insurance, as I do, to go get annual checkup to get what labs I can get done with them,
Yes.
they just put it in the portal. They don't even really do anything about it. So I do my own FDN practitioner method of we do blood chemistry analysis. What does it mean in optimal versus normal range? But I'm always frustrated that people are not getting the information they need to the person that they trust for their health and their future self, getting the right
Yeah, I
info.
get very frustrated. But I also think that we have to accept that, right? We
Yeah.
have to accept that maybe our medical doctor isn't the person that we should be going to see for our hormones, especially to Canadians, actually, because Canadians, because we've always had free healthcare, they really are resistant to paying for anything to do with
Hmm.
health. They just
Hmm.
don't feel that they should because they've had it for free their whole life. And because they can go see their doctor for free, they're like, well, I'm not going to go pay somebody to tell me, or to
Hmm.
run labs for me. But less than 7% of doctors are trained in menopause, and none of them are trained in perimenopause. They have to pay out of pocket to even learn about bioidentical hormones and how to use them. So you can imagine no family doctor is going to go out of their way to take special training in hormone therapy. They just won't.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So we have to start separating that and go, okay, I can try with my doctor, but if they're not willing to work with me on this, I have to be open to going elsewhere and paying out of pocket for it. And there's so many options now that it is affordable. There's many affordable options when it comes to hormone replacement therapy.
Hmm. Yeah, luckily. So just to list some problems and you see what your answers are. If there's here's with the common problems we get from I hear about often low estrogen. So I'll just list them off. You can say any comments and solutions. Hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, atrophy, mood swings, anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, including insomnia, early waking, cognitive changes, brain fog, memory lapses, bone density loss, osteopenia, osteoporosis, dry skin, thinning hair, brittle nails, increased LDL cholesterol, and
We're just
increased
so lucky
cardiovascular
as
risk,
women, hey?
weight gain, especially around the abdominal. Those are all signs and symptoms of low estrogen. Would
Correct.
you say that's correct? And that,
Absolutely. And then there's weird ones like itchy skin, itchy ears, ringing in the ears, heart palpitations, really sore joints. I don't know if you said that one, sore
mhm,
back, like back pain, vaginal atrophy, not just dryness, inability to orgasm or have a good orgasm. That can, like estrogen can help help you to have better orgasms and more sensitivity in that area. Um, Also, we can lose what looks like it disappears. It doesn't really, but we can lose our menorah, which is like the folds around our labia because of the dryness. And so it's like you're like literally, it's like a part of your vagina can disappear, which is just so weird. But that is estrogen. And so we need estrogen for all of those things that you talked about. Like it affects the hair shafts so that our hair can grow better. And so without it, women can lose their hair. They can get yeast infections, bladder
mhm,
infections, like more
mhm.
prone to those things because prolapse, all of these things can start happening because of the loss of estrogen. And I mean, the list goes on. They've realized there's over like 800 different functions in the body that estrogen helps with. So you
So,
think like there's receptors for it everywhere.
mhm. So the whole thing on hormone replacement or bioidenticals, getting solutions of estrogen is safe. And you talked about this in the last episode. There's a zillion podcasts out there on hormone replacement as we age and when to start. So if we can supplement, take some estrogen, as you talk about, would that help with all these areas? And do people actually see a big
Yes.
change if they struggle with a lot of these?
Yes, huge change. And it can happen quite quickly on a lot of those things, like hot flashes, night sweats, of course, right? It can be very quick to resolve those as soon as you start using estrogen. The things like bone, the bone, heart, brain protection that it can help with, that's obviously over a long period of time. So we want to make sure that as we're losing estrogen in our 40s, that we start to replace it then in perimenopause because you can't feel your bones deteriorating, right? You can't necessarily feel your brain building up plaque. You may
Mhm.
notice that, oh, I'm a little bit more foggy in the brain and I'm having problems with short-term memory. So you can start to maybe notice some things with the brain function, but we'll typically put it off, put it off, put it off, and just be like, oh, it's just age. But all of these things we need to start catching earlier. The loss of collagen. Like
Mhm.
the loss of estrogen drives the loss of collagen and elastin in the skin. So we age faster the less estrogen we have. And so if we can keep the estrogen at a good level as we're going into menopause, you're going to be far better off as far as the like appearance of aging goes. I just
Mhm.
wrote a whole podcast about this, about the beauty of hormones. And literally, how do hormones help us keep our youthful look? How does it help us keep our, skin healthy and less wrinkles, shrink pore
Mhm.
size? And I mean, it goes on, and it was an hour and a half podcast recording on my own. And I'm like, oh, this is too long. But there were so many things that I found. Like, for instance, old lady voice, right?
Mhm.
Did you not always just think that we're all going to get old lady voice? We're going to sound all croaky but actually, that's from the loss of estrogen. So if you
Wow.
can keep your estrogen up, you may not get old lady voice. The hunchback that happens, like shrinking, right? The old lady
Mhm.
shrinkage, that's your bones. And that starts happening at a quite a young age. And
Mhm.
so, obviously doing things like lifting weights and eating properly and all of that, but also replacing all of the hormones is going to help to keep your bones healthy and strong, muscles, things like that. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
yes,
So
yeah, estrogen's definitely the answer.
but then, so we test, and then when do we start supplementing? How low do we want to be to say, hey, this is a good opportunity to start adding it in? And then, talking about you, I bought your cream and how to put that in if that's helping, happening my
Happening and
skin.
helping. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So when you're looking at labs, day 21, if you go get your hormones tested
Mhm.
and the estradiol is below 65, definitely if it's below 50, that is your sign you want to start replacing.
Mm.
If FSH, and I like to do them together. So you do an FSH typically on day 3 of the cycle if you can, and then you do the estradiol on day 21. If the FSH is above 20, even if it's above 10, and then your estradiol is below 50, that's like two things that are telling you, yes, it's time. Because FSH goes up, the less estradiol we have. It's the brain signaling to the ovaries, like, come on, come on, come on, keep producing these hormones. And so it gets louder and louder, and it keeps getting louder the older you get. And so we'll see women that come into us that have been without hormones for 10 years, and they'll have an FSH of 90, 100.
Mm.
And so we want to keep that, if we can, below 25. So we like to test both those things. But then, if a woman comes in and let's say her estrogen looks normal and it's above 65, but she's, getting a lighter period, missing periods, getting hot flashes and night sweats, vaginal dryness, then it could be too low for her. And then in that case, it'd be like, okay, well, let's trial a little bit of estrogen and let's see how it makes you feel. If it gets rid of these symptoms, then that means you needed it, right?
Mm.
Some women have what's called a high SHBG, which is a binding protein, and that can tie up a lot of the estrogen. So they're not able to use it.
Mm.
And this can be from different things, like if you fast a lot, low carb diets, birth control pills are terrible for it, to permanently raise SHBG. Thyroid medication can raise SHBG. So some women, if they have this elevated binding protein, their estrogen could look totally normal, but yet they're having all the symptoms. And so then you need to top it up or lower the SHBG if you can.
Do you like to do the Dutch test and blood chemistry panel on hormones?
Ideally, yes. Yeah,
Hmm.
if you can afford to do them both on the same day, 100%. That's like the best of both worlds for sure. Because blood's going to tell you one thing and urine's going to tell you a whole different thing. And so putting those two together is fantastic. And I always
Hmm.
tell women at some point in your life, whether it's on when you're on HRT or while you're still cycling, it's good to do a Dutch test at least once in your life so that you can see what you're more prone to as far as how you break down estrogen, how you break down testosterone, because that can tell you a lot, right? And it can help you with your HRT and how to really fine tune things.
Hmm. So an example I know of someone that did their estrogen and they thought they were low and it was 200 and something. So to me, it'd be, is there something congested in the liver detox pathways, the estrogen metabolism, and then ideally, do a Dutch test. But have you ever seen people that think they're low, but they're actually high because of poor, so the estrogen dominance because of liver congestion issues?
Yes, I see that. I've seen it lots. But I've also seen too, what can happen is because perimenopause, we can have really extreme fluctuations with estrogen. And actually replacing the estrogen with a low dose can help to steady the boat a little bit.
Mm.
But what we'll see sometimes is women will come to us, they'll have like really low estradiol, have all the symptoms. So we put them on estrogen. And then 6 months later, we run labs again. And then it's like up to 200. And you're like, whoa, what just happened? But this is what happens the closer to menopause you get. It starts to fluctuate. It's like one day you're going to have really low levels, the next day you can have really high because the body's like, you can have this like flux of
Mm.
this. I compare it to like the final, when you're watching, um, like the final show, like where it's like
Please,
gonna
grand
push
finale.
the last little bit. The fireworks are like, when you're watching fireworks at the very end,
Yeah.
they put out a whole bunch. It's kind of like that. It's like that end
Grand finale, say
finale of
goodbye.
like exactly the grand finale. That's what the word I'm looking for. Of like, okay, this is it. This is all the estrogen we've got in. We're done. So this can happen, and that's
Yeah.
fine. And you just adjust as you go. Yeah.
I know that
Yeah.
person's 53, almost 54 years old, and they're on their way probably.
Well,
Okay.
that's it too, right? And you'll see this in older women, and it's like, well, you're running out of estrogen. Like it's just a matter of days. If you're 53, and for sure, it's going to go very quickly.
Yeah, I bet. Okay. Progesterone, we talk about not as much as in the limelight as estrogen, but common problems relating to low progesterone come up as sleep issues, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, anxiety, irritability, mood swings, irregular periods during perimenopause, heavy or painful periods, PMS worsening, and breast tenderness. Anything to add and say about low progesterone issues?
Yes. And so it can be a little bit in the beginning, just like what we were talking about with estrogen, where we come into this world with a certain amount of eggs. And once those eggs are done, you are no longer going to produce progesterone because we produce progesterone from the corpus luteum after we ovulate. And so when we stop ovulating as often, then we'll start that progesterone will start to go down. And that happens in the same kind of way where you'll have months of ovulation and you'll ovulate every month for 6 months, and then suddenly you won't ovulate for 3 months, or you'll have crappy eggs, and then you won't produce as much progesterone. And so I'll tell women that are in that phase where they're getting symptoms of the perimenopause. Maybe some cycles are bad, but some cycles are okay. So they'll be like, yeah, some cycles I'm like, oh my gosh, my PMS is so bad, I can't sleep. But then other cycles I feel fine. Or sometimes my cycle comes early and it'll come on day 21, and then the next month it comes on day 28. Those are signs that sometimes you've ovulated, sometimes you haven't. And so for women like that, I'll tell them, if day 14 comes along and you don't and you suddenly start feeling the PMS quite quickly, and let's say it's like day 14 to 21, you start to feel PMS, you start to get anxiety, maybe some insomnia, your breasts are tender. That's your sign that you probably didn't ovulate, and you can supplement with some progesterone. And then if you feel good and you're not getting those symptoms, maybe you ovulated and you're producing progesterone, and then don't use the progesterone cream.
And then the progesterone cream is just for 2 weeks. They're not, I mean, you have to work with a practitioner or expert to help you figure out when to use everything, the timing and dosage, and not just taking it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, progesterone, as I said, we naturally produce it after ovulation, which is typically day 14 of a cycle. And so we want women that are cycling, we want them to be taking that progesterone in sync with their natural cycle. So if you're going to take progesterone, take it from days 14 to 28 of your cycle, or for the last 2 weeks of a cycle.
So there's so much, as you already said, so much to the role of estrogen in our body. What about progesterone? As we talk about supplementing and hormone replacement so much on estrogen, we just talked about progesterone, but is it as important to supplement as we're going through this time in life and
Yeah.
switching?
It really is. And I think there's a lot of misconception around the fact that, oh, if you don't have a uterus, let's say you've had a hysterectomy, no need to use progesterone because you don't need to protect your uterus.
Mm,
Wrong. So progesterone does many other things. It really helps with bones. It helps with the myelin sheaths in the brain. So it's brain
mm,
protective, can lower inflammation in the brain. It's actually used in post-concussion in order
mm,
to, like, high doses of progesterone used post concussion will reduce brain inflammation, which
mm,
is pretty incredible. So, massive impact on the brain. It can be really great to protect the breast tissue. So, it does counterbalance the growth of estrogen also in breast tissue,
mm.
which you want, because uncontrolled growth can lead to breast cancer.
That's
So we
right.
don't want that. So it can
Mm,
help protect your breast. It acts on the GABA receptors in your brain, which is needed for sleep. So
mm,
progesterone can really help women with sleep, because it helps to induce sleep because of that action on the GABA receptors.
mm.
Good for the heart, good for the skin, good for the thyroid, helps build collagen in your skin. So you can't use like even topical progesterone on your face is great for helping with wrinkles and collagen production. So yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, it some women find it increases their sex drive, can get rid of anxiety for that for many women. So yeah, many different things.
It's important to have our hormones in balance so we don't have estrogen dominance. Isn't it still possible as we have lower hormones that we can't just take estrogen and have this just imbalance to the rest of the hormones and have lack of
Yeah.
harmony between our hormones
Then
at
they
all?
help each other to work.
Mhm.
Yeah, like they're yin and yang, estrogen and progesterone together. They really help each other. Progesterone helps with thyroid function as well, but you need progesterone to have optimal estrogen action, and then estrogen's needed for optimal progesterone action. So it goes both
Mhm.
ways.
All right, testosterone. You touched on it a little bit. I feel I need to get testosterone as I read this. Low libido, fatigue, low motivation, loss of muscle mass and strength, reduced confidence or drive, increased fat mass, especially central obesity, blunted recovery from exercise. I think I checked most of those boxes.
Yeah. It's like check, check, check.
Check,
Yeah.
check.
And a lot of the symptoms can overlap, but yeah, testosterone, I always say it really gives women confidence. It gives us our lady balls, I like to say, where it really does it helps you like to get shit done. That's what,
Hmm.
it's like without it, you're not as aggressive. You're not as
Mm.
like get out there and like conquer the world kind of attitude. And so for women that are real go-getters, losing testosterone can be devastating because they lose that drive that they had in life that helped
Hmm.
them to become successful businesswomen or successful, in sports. And
Mm.
it really does give us that confidence and that go out and get stuff done kind of attitude. And then, of course, on top of that, libido, huge for the libido, really helps with like going out there and like initiating the act of sex, going out there and feeling confident to go out and attract your partner, or estrogen, it's more about the act of it, but testosterone gives you the drive to go out and get it. And actually we have a spike of testosterone right before we ovulate, and that's all on purpose because that's going to help you go out and seek out a partner
Isn't that
because you're
crazy? The
about to
body did
ovulate,
that.
right?
Yeah.
So it is. It's so crazy. We have a spike of estradiol and we have a spike of testosterone right before we ovulate to make us go out and have sex and to prime your body.
Wow.
It's crazy. And the
That
pheromones
is
go
crazy.
up at the
Yeah.
same time.
Well, timing.
And when
Whoever's in
there is
charge
a
of
little
that.
bit of research, yeah, and they're showing some research that shows that estradiol and testosterone, when it goes down, both of them go down, it can lower the pheromones.
Hmm.
And so women don't, the feeling of not feeling as sexy or attractive when you start going into menopause, there's a chemical process to that. Because when we're no longer producing these pheromones, we're not producing these hormones that are making us feel sexual and want to go out there and get the sex and let off the smell of attracting a partner. It's crazy. So if we can keep our hormones up, we can keep those pheromones up too, which is pretty cool.
Now, how do we increase testosterone?
Okay,
Food and
so
exercise, but supplement.
testosterone, yeah, you can, of course, replace the testosterone if need be, but you do have a better chance of increasing your own production than the other hormones, right? Like when we lose estrogen and progesterone, that's it, they're done. We're going to produce a little tiny minuscule amount from the adrenal system, but basically the bulk of it's gone when the ovaries are gone. And testosterone, we still have it kicking around. We still have the ability to bring it back up. And that's why we have to direct our attention to the adrenal system because the ovaries are done. Now we got to pay attention to, okay, conversions and the adrenal system.
Mm.
So things like low doses of DHEA, that converts to testosterone. Things like Tongat LE, it's one of the number one supplements that I'll recommend for women to help boost their testosterone levels.
Mm.
There's things that you can take that will lower the binding protein that I was talking about, and then free up some of your testosterone. So, because some women, they could have a good total testosterone, but their free testosterone's low. And so you can take things like boron, Tongat Ali, fenugreek,
Hmm.
zinc, I think vitamin D. These are all things that will lower that SHBG and free up some of those hormones, the testosterone and estradiol and dihydrotestosterone. So those are probably my favorite. And there are some, you can find supplements that have a combination of all those things. Like it'll have some zinc in it, it'll have some boron, it'll have the Tongata Lee, it's going to have, you know, maybe some fenugreek in it, but they have that combination of things that can help lower SHBG and boost your testosterone levels
Hmm.
naturally. And then, of course, paying attention to stress, baby your adrenals, make sure that they're healthy, take some adaptogens, take things that's going to support that stress system. And then, of course, lifestyle is super important for stress management. And then lifting weights, obviously, is also key.
Hmm. So, with a lot of people just would want testosterone, but people not supplement as much with testosterone cream than the other precursors to it?
No, we find that most women want to just go straight to the replacement, testosterone replacement. Yeah. At least with our clinic, and maybe because we attract those women because we can prescribe testosterone in every state. So we do get a lot of women that want testosterone that come through our door. Compared to there's many online hormone clinics now, but they only offer estrogen and progesterone. They don't offer testosterone because it is harder to legally and prescribe it, right? So you have to have a doctor that can prescribe it in every state. And
Mm.
so that's kind of, it makes it a little bit more challenging, but our doctors can. We have a couple of different physicians that we work with that can prescribe and we can cover all the states. So
Mm.
most women, they do. They want to jump to it because they just are like, give me back the testosterone.
Yeah.
But I do think like I'm kind of in the in between because I think that we should try to increase our own levels if we can, right? Before jumping to testosterone replacement therapy because TRT can come with a whole host of negative side effects, more so than estrogen or progesterone. So we see a lot of women that start TRT, they feel incredible at first, but after about 3 to 6 months, they can start, losing head hair. They can start getting greasy skin, acne, facial whiskers, right? So hair growth on the face, no one wants that. And we don't want to lose our hair either. And so we do see that happening to quite a bit of women. And then if you lower the dose, they don't feel the testosterone as much. And
Mm.
then so it's kind of like they're stuck going, ooh, I love how this makes me feel. And everything's so much better, but I don't want to lose my hair and I don't want to grow a beard. And this is not high doses. I'm talking like maybe 1.5 milligrams a day of testosterone. That's not a high dose.
Do they
So
do the
you can still get
lotion?
those negative side effects.
Do they
We
do
prefer to
ointment?
do injection.
Mm.
Yeah, we do have someone that don't like doing injections, so we do the cream, but cream converts higher into dihydrotestosterone, which gives you more of those androgenic side effects.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
preferably we do subcutaneous injections with small needles.
What about growth hormone?
Growth hormone is the most expensive hormone to replace.
Mm.
So if you're wanting actual growth hormone, it's probably going to run you about $600 a month, which is ridiculous. And so the better option now is peptides, right? So if you're using a growth hormone secretagogue, and these are peptides that will help your own body to, to produce more growth hormone. And those are cheap as far as like expenses go. It's, you're looking at $100 for maybe 3 months worth or
Mm.
whatever it is. Like it's really inexpensive. You can get some of them through prescription. Other ones have been taken off the market, and you have to go through third-party sites that are like peptide research sites. You can purchase through them, but you always want to make sure that you're using a good, well-known site that proves that they've tested all of their products and they can show you a certificate of analysis.
Mhm. Yes, I always say that we can't out supplement the lifestyle habits, the exercise, the nutrition, but at a certain point at my age, I feel that I need to add those in because when you're doing all the right things you hear about as the protein and the lifting heavy weights, and you're still not getting the desired results, then get your blood work updated to make sure you're not too high in anything, but just get that optimal range and supplementing, working with someone that can course correct as you go. But make sure you always have all the lifestyle, nutrition, and exercise in order first before you start taking these. Don't you? Do you feel that way, or do you have an order of operations different than that?
I always want women to have the lifestyle piece in place, right? Obviously. However, we do see some women that are a hot mess. And they'll come in, they'll say they've been without hormones for a while, or their hormones are plummeting and they're really being affected by it. And they're having severe reactions to that hormonal loss. And when I say severe, I mean some women get severely depressed,
Mm.
anxiety ridden, heart palpitations, really, really tired, like can't get off their couch, kind of tired.
Mm.
Um, they have to leave their job because they can't function at work anymore. Their brain can't function. They can't speak properly. And, if a woman is in that state, to tell her to get up and exercise and to
That's not
eat
going to
well,
happen.
that's not fair. It's
No,
not fair.
makes
It's
sense.
like you can't expect that. And so sometimes we have to get that foundation
Hmm.
of the hormones in place
Yeah.
first. Because when they get in and it's quite quick for them to feel better,
Then
then
you
they'll
can
go,
work.
okay, now I want to exercise.
Hmm.
Now I can do these other things that you're telling me I should be doing in order to get the most out of my HRT. But we do want every woman, ideally, to have those foundational pieces, all of them in place. Like it is ideal. Like if you can make sure that you have a great gut system, that you're detoxing your liver a couple times a year, or maybe doing like the parasite cleanses, or making sure you don't have any mold or heavy metals, making sure that your diet's right for midlife, making sure that you're working out and you're lifting heavy, and that you're managing your stress. Like if you can have all of that in place and start your HRT, oh man, you're going to do amazing. It's going to be
Hmm.
great. And that's ideal. That's in the ideal
Hmm.
world. So we do want that, but it can't happen for everybody.
That totally makes sense. So that example, I can see that you can't make those right choices when you don't have the building blocks of your body. So think of, before you start lifting heavy weights, I keep trying to get this across social media. You need to have the foundation set up, the neuromuscular, the wiring system, and you can't just go lift 5 reps heavy without getting injured, or box jumps, jump training. That you have to get all the foundation. Same thing before you, if you're
Yeah.
really low hormones and been struggling a long time, you can't get it together until you get the missing parts. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And say like thyroid too. There's so many women with misdiagnosed or undiagnosed thyroid problems. And that's really hard. I had that, and it was so hard for me to exercise. I felt like my body was made of lead. Like it was so heavy all the time. I just felt like I didn't have any oxygen running through my system, and just it was so challenging for me to get up and actually do anything. So
Yeah.
I get that.
That makes sense. I mean, I need to go get my blood work. Actually, I was supposed to go today, but I was waiting till next week. And I have had really low T3, and I've been taking T3, but I still don't feel I can't get stronger. And I take forever to recover, and just sluggish, and running is just a walk. So that's when I think you have to go get, it's not just thyroid. We need to look at the whole picture of all the hormones. We call it metabolic harmony, and how everything needs to be in in the right range and optimal range so you can thrive and not have these,
Yeah.
when things off, everything seems to be off.
T3 going down is a big problem that we see. Like we see it in so many women's labs. I'd probably say 80% of women that come through our door have a suboptimal T3. And so when those sex hormones drop, we start having problems converting T4 to T3.
Mm.
And most people don't know how to optimize that, because T3 has a really strong negative feed. Thyroid in general has a very strong negative feedback loop to the brain.
Mm.
And so if you're put on a small dose, let's say you do Armor 30 milligrams, or you do a T3 15, 20 micrograms, something like that, it can actually make your levels worse. And we see this all the time. Women will be put on 30 milligrams of Armor because their thyroid's suboptimal. And then a month later, they test and their numbers are even lower. And they're like, what? And that's because you're telling the brain that there's thyroid coming in. So it actually lowers your production of it. And so you
Mhm.
have to keep putting it in until you've replaced the thyroid with a functional level of proper thyroid hormones. And so
Mhm.
you have to be very, you have to watch it closely. And I would recommend testing every 4 weeks your thyroid, at least the T4, T3, so that you keep eye on it, because it typically happens within 3 to 4 weeks where that negative feedback loop will kick in. So at first you can
Yeah.
feel better because you've got some in, and then suddenly you feel worse.
Yeah.
And then, okay, I test, okay, I got to increase this. Watch that reverse T3, watch the T3, and you just have to stay on top of it.
Well, I know you have a great podcast with Amy on that. You guys have done a few different ones talking about
We
thyroid
have,
and
yeah.
hormones, so people can listen to that. So last one, and we just have a couple minutes left, so I know you have stuff to do too. Metabolic inflexibility. insulin resistance, blood sugar instability, increased inflammation, oxidative stress, reduced mitochondria function and energy, gut health disruption due to hormone influence and gut motility microbiome. Anything to say with all those symptoms before we wrap it up?
Most of
That's
those are
like
due
two
to the
hours.
loss of estradiol. Most of those things, like
Okay.
we need estradiol for proper gut function. Um, you know, all the things that you just listed, pretty much, it's low estrogen.
So,
Estrogen is the most mis like it's judged. It's when doctors are so afraid to give it to us, and it's like, okay, we've had estradiol our entire life in copious amounts, and then suddenly it's this dangerous hormone when we don't have it anymore. That makes no sense. I mean, if it was
mm,
dangerous, every 25-year-old woman would be dead.
we wouldn't make it this
So
far.
watch, yeah, like it's we need it for mitochondrial health. We need it for the energy. We need it the list goes on and on, honestly. So it is the one to watch and pay attention to.
Okay. So, finish up. How do we get help? What can you do for us? Where do we go?
Yes. Okay. So my company, we do prescribe in every state. We do prescribe testosterone. We don't do pellets. We do cream or injection. And then, so we offer private coaching. We got some coaching programs where we, split the payments up to make it a little bit easier on women. And then we also have a group coaching program that's kind of a DIY or HRT type thing where you can do it yourself with our group coaching program where we have group coaching calls once a week. You could submit labs so that we can help you kind of direct you into, okay, I think you need to start some estrogen, progesterone, whatever it might be. And then women will take those recommendations either to their primary or they'll do it themselves. And I do offer an over-the-counter hormone creams, which is what you were referring to earlier when you said you used my estrogen cream on your face. We do have, like, our best-selling product is our Biased estrogen face cream. It does wonders for the face and it really helps to build up the collagen, shrink pores, things like that. So, and it's very clean, but it's also very affordable. So
Mhm.
we created the line of products so that all women could have access to estrogen and progesterone as they age, because you
Yes.
can get it without prescription.
I know it's amazing. And
Mhm.
I do love that the price point of the creams because I'm on a budget. Most people are on a budget. We don't have $1,000 to spend
Yeah,
on all this stuff every month. And so keeping it realistic and stuff that we do need to invest in our health and our future self, that we do need to be able to afford this stuff. So it's great to have those options.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're coming out with some even more cost-effective ones. We've got an estradiol oil coming and a progesterone oil coming out, and it's going to work out to be like $10 less a month, depending on what your dosage is. But that, one bottle is going to last you anywhere from 6 months to a year.
Wow. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. It was so
amazing.
much more cost effective. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Now,
clean products.
clean, toxic free, looking at the ingredients. That's why I only go to people as yourself that I can trust they did the work for me to get reliable ingredients
Yeah.
that are not filled with toxins. And because I always read the ingredients and companies reach out every day with stuff, I'm like, okay, let me read that. Let me see some research. And they're not all that clean. So,
No, they're not. Yeah. And
no.
the ones you get from a pharmacy, no, they're not.
Mm. Well, I'll put all the links in the show notes and people can find out more from your sites and listen to your podcast too. Great information there. So thank you.
Yes. And we have a coupon code for you, don't we? Or
Yes,
did.
I'll put it in
Do
the
we
notes.
still?
We had that. I'll make sure it's updated. If it's Coach Debbie Potts, well, let me know if it doesn't work, but we'll make sure it works for everyone.
Okay.
So,
Amazing.
all right. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.